look how weird they are, rather than go through the actual difficult research of trying to make them explicable, trying to make them human and understandable in our own terms.
Making the Aztecs human and understandable is the challenge for David Carrasco.
Many of our descriptions of ancient societies are so simple, but in fact the Aztecs show us that human beings are complex. To take the simple notion that they're bloody people and to show that they're both people after the blood and after the flower is to bring us to a wonderful image of understanding and asking about the nature of complexity.
Aside from the violence, it seems, there was a much gentler side to Aztec life. An extraordinary love of beauty emerges in the most popular of their arts, poetry. Poets were loved and highly revered. One of the most famous was also a great architect of the empire.
It's not true that we come to this earth to live. We come only to sleep, only to dream.
It's an extremely beautiful poetry which essentially sings about the fleetingness of life, the brevity of life, the inevitability of death, the price we must pay to be on earth, the beauty of the things that surround us, flowers, love, women, children. All these things are celebrated by the Aztecs and speak of a humane spirit which I think is not only similar but superior to ours.
Our body is a flower. As grass becomes green in the springtime, so our hearts will open and blossom, and then they will die.
The god of poetry was also the god of flowers, music, and joy. But while he's depicted covered in flowers, he also wears the flayed skin of a sacrificial victim. Life and death went hand in hand for the Aztecs. The blood rituals seemed to appease the gods and sustain the Aztecs' expanding empire. But then the rhythm of the seasons broke down. Drought struck the Valley of Mexico in 1450, lasting for 4 years. Aztec records show diseased and starving people. Thousands died. Perhaps the gods needed more. Among the remains of Tlatelolco, site of the Great Market and the second biggest pyramid complex, archaeologists made a horrifying discovery. It dated from the desperate years of drought. On the threshold of a temple, they found the bone remains of around 40 children. The bones were grouped together with precious ritual objects, an offering to the gods. Children's bones from the same period have also been found at the Great Pyramid. It wasn't unusual for the Aztecs to sacrifice young children, but these numbers are exceptional. The victims are thought to have been between 2 and 6 years of age. Scientists are currently analyzing the remains to find out why these children were chosen. By extracting and testing samples of their DNA, the scientists will discover their sex and more about their health. When the terrible years of drought finally ended, the Aztecs built a series of new temples, giving thanks to the gods, so that it would never happen again. On the hill of Tezcotzingo, on the line which joined the mountains with the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, the poet-ruler of the time designed a ritual center dedicated to the god of rain and his consort, the water goddess. Historians had known about this place from the Aztec records, but it was Dick Townsend who first uncovered its significance.
I simply had a kind of premonition that this amazing sort of conical hill was going to be very, very important. And sure enough, upon coming up the trail and seeing that great tank of water and realizing that streams of water were flowing in here, I thought, this is a sacred mountain.
Sculpting the landscape, the Aztecs created a beautiful ideal model intended to bring rain to the real world. Water channeled from the mountains through an aqueduct flowed around the hill, filling baths and basins at shrines along the way. Walkways followed the channels, paths for ritual processions by priests and rulers. This paradise garden of flowing water is an extraordinary testimony to the skills and beliefs of its architects. Above this shrine, a temple celebrates the poet-ruler who conceived this place. Higher still, a temple honors the rain god. Corn or maize goddesses were cut into the rock to ensure the fertility of the land. The terraces below were once covered with plants and trees, some brought from the farthest ends of the empire. The Aztecs had a remarkable knowledge of horticulture, experimenting in these gardens with species new to the Valley of Mexico. They were also renowned herbalists and healers. But all their healing wisdom and all their offerings to the gods would be powerless against the disaster which was to come. Over a year before the Spaniards arrived in 1519, according to Aztec records, a series of omens warned of impending catastrophe. The temple of the warrior god of the sun suddenly burst into flames. Comets and lightning followed, and the ruler of the time, Moctezuma, had a vision. People coming as conquerors and riding on deer.
Marco Polo had been to China, Vasco da Gama had discovered the route through the Cape, the continent was in ferment, in movement, whereas the Mexican world was extremely closed in. It was absolutely hermetically closed, so that the arrival of the Spaniards must have been like the arrival of people from Mars to us would be today. Totally unsuspected aliens, totally unsuspected aliens. The shock must have been profound, and I think it's one of the reasons that explains the downfall of the Aztec Empire. In a sense, I think the Aztec Empire died of astonishment more than of anything else.
By extraordinary coincidence, the 500 conquistadors led by Hernan Cortez arrived during the exact year when an Aztec prophecy foretold the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god.
Feathered serpents represent not only the precious powers of the earth, but also the flowers of the earth. The ability of the earth to be reborn in a kind of optimistic cycle that was very important to Aztec life. The symbol of Quetzalcoatl also, he was a myth of eternal return, that he would return periodically in the form of a ruler, in the form of a great priest or a great man. He's a symbol who's there in the beginning of history, at the center of history as a great creator god, and then at the end of their history as someone who returns at first to save them, but then in the face of Spanish arms and disease is not able to allow Aztec life to go on.
The prophecy suggested that the returning Quetzalcoatl would be fair-skinned and bring peace and justice. Could this be why the Spanish soldiers were welcomed so warmly? Their leader, Hernan Cortez, described his impressions in letters to Charles V, King of Spain.
I cannot describe 1/100th part of all the things which could be mentioned. I will say only that these people live almost like those in Spain, and in as much harmony and order as there. and considering that they're barbarous and so far from the knowledge of God and cut off from all civilized